Welcome to AI for Founders. I am Ryan Estes. Today we're joined by David Connors, co-founder and CEO of The Swarm. David's company is rewriting the B2B playbook with one bold idea. Go-to-network is the new go-to-market. Since launching in 2021, The Swarm has raised nearly $8 million to help sales and revenue teams uncover and activate the warm intros already hiding inside their networks. With a freemium SaaS model and a fast-growing base of mid-market and enterprise SaaS customers, The Swarm is turning connections into conversions and cold outreach into a thing of the past. David's favorite AI tools? Replit and Bolt. His mission? Make networks your most powerful growth channel. Let's dive into the future of relationship-driven sales in the age of AI. But first, this episode is brought to you by Kitcaster, the podcast booking platform for high-growth founders. You've built something amazing. Now it's time to talk about it. Kitcaster gets you interviewed on top podcasts so you can grow your audience, build trust, and drive revenue. Ready to share your story? Visit kitcaster.com and apply today.
Shining stars, computer light. Take the flight in the glow of neon bright.
David, how are you today?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm really excited to talk to you for a couple of reasons. You just had a big launch on Product Hunt, number one product of the day. You have just an incredible tool called The Swarm.
Sure.
Now, before we talk about that, I'd just like to get your temperature on AI right now. What particularly excites you about AI, or is there kind of a product that particularly has your interest?
I'm always sort of going back and forth with the different LLMs. I think like Perplexity is one that I'm looking the most at right now, but Claude is one that I find myself keep coming back to as well. So trying to just stay on top of all the different releases as they come out. But as, you know, just as my go-to assistant, right? Just asking questions, brainstorming ideas, drafting content, just 100 different things throughout the day. And, you know, I think the other fun thing we've been tinkering with is sort of prototyping. So using like Replit or Lovable to spin up some prototypes and sort of using that as our like front end team to sort of sprint up these customer facing prototypes that we can really quickly kind of get feedback on. That's what I'm really enjoying when kind of AI is moving right now.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I like that you say prototyping. I prefer the technical term vibe coding.
Yeah.
But it's so fun. You know, when you're evaluating these tools, because like you said, like Replit, Bolt, Lovable, they all kind of have little attributes that are different. Or you're talking about LLMs, you know, Perplexity, Claude, GPT, Google's up there, Gemini's in there.
Yep.
What are you looking for? What gives one tool an edge over the other? Or are you kind of going back and forth?
I find it so hard to stay on top of all of the different like technical releases. I honestly find myself just going to my peers and people I trust and asking them, you know, what are you guys using? And then doing that on a cadence of every week, every month, and just seeing what are the latest tools people are liking, what's better for more creative kind of, you know, brainstorming type stuff, what's better for more in the weeds, technical delivery of things. But yeah, that's how I'm doing, just sort of staying close to my network and kind of understanding what they're using, who the people I trust and respect and admire, what are they using, you know?
Totally. With everything having a subscription attached to it, I feel like a little bit anxious about it all the time. You know, I have the same thing, kind of the council of experts. I'm like, are you sure? Lovable. I only have so many credits, like I'm going to go in. So, you know, there's an extreme FOMO with tools right now, but it is kind of fun to go in there and see how each tool differentiates.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's good to remember as well that we are living in a very, I don't want to say disjointed, but like there's different realities for different parts of the world. Right? And I think living in the Bay Area and you're in Denver, you're in a tech hub, you're kind of at the forefront of a lot of this innovation. You're already kind of living in the future in a lot of ways. So whilst it may feel like we are falling behind constantly and not like able to keep up, we're sure you're still in the top 1% or even top 0.1% of people who are actually experimenting and using these tools. So try to at least sort of give myself a little bit of grace that I don't need to be internal at OpenAI. I know exactly what the latest model is going to be doing or what's coming up. As long as I'm sort of staying somewhat on top of it, I think, we're doing a good job.
Yeah, there is a feeling that if you're not getting the leaked OpenAI memo first, that you're missing something, But to your point, there's a great vibe coding meetup group in Denver that's small, but the people that are in it are very, very high quality, from serial entrepreneurs to senior programmers to absolute novices. And the cool thing about the group is there's just this spirit and enthusiasm where they're like, hey, what can we do with this stuff?
Yeah.
And everybody shares that, and everybody's opinion is really kind of like democratized because the tools are so powerful. To your point, you can spin up these, like, you can get your idea into somebody's hands and they can tinker with it really, really quick. So it's pretty cool.
Really cool. Yeah. Yeah. I think we're living in a very interesting age, this sort of transition from relying on a team of engineers to build something that's going to take months or years, to now one person without any technical experience being able to spin up an app over the weekend. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
And it's only getting better and better, obviously. So that's where it's like, where's it going to be 6 months, 12 months, 18 months from now? That's going to be very different
100%.
right now. Yeah.
Yeah. And I suppose the downside of that is it's hard to find when there's a serious tool, like when there's something that's like it's seriously supported. It's a company. You have to kind of vet it. I'm a little bit more delicate, like putting in contact information, because it is so fast to spin up. So when I look at your tool in particular, you guys launched, like I mentioned, a great product hunt launch, but right out of the gate, like you've got some heavy hitters that you're already associated, with HubSpot integration. There is Clay integration. There's Gmail integration, LinkedIn integration. So for me, when I'm evaluating a tool right on face value, that's going to be a big indicator of the tool can be trusted. Now, I'd like to kind of transition and start talking about the Swarm because it looks so cool, and I have so many questions. One, I'd love to know kind of the problem you're solving, but I listened to you on another podcast, and you said go-to network is the new go-to market. So I'd love to kind of hear and understand what you meant by that.
Yeah. So we see this go-to network motion as the natural successor to the historical predictable revenue playbook. So kind of dialing the clock back, right? 10, 15 years, first popularized by Salesforce. Predictable revenue playbook was all about scaling up the number of touch points that you had with your prospective customers. So hiring a lot of SDRs or BDRs to do outbound campaigns. They were cold calling, cold emailing, and sort of getting to this point where it was then popularized this spray and pray motion, right? We're just increasing the volume as much as you can. Now, we had some tools then that started to make this easier and easier. Some mass outbound sales engagement tools like Outreach and SalesLoft. You then had Apollo.io come along with their bundling of data and Outreach. And then Clay comes along to then massively give these data to all of these different sales people and sales teams. And now you have these AI agents who are autonomously sending out thousands of emails at a time and allowing these salespeople to reach 1,000 customers in a day. And that reaches this saturation point, right? Where the buyers are suddenly, well, not suddenly, just over time, that the buyers are inundated with all of this noise. Okay. And that's kind of the situation we're in now, where the predictable revenue playbook just doesn't work anymore because buyers have so many undifferentiated emails and voicemails that they're just ignoring it. And this is what Mark Koskova put as the great ignore, which is the era that we're in now, the great ignore, right? Where everyone is just ignoring. You're seeing email tools starting to push things to spam or to another folder where you don't even see it anymore. So how do you get the buyer's attention? And how do you get a buyer to actually want to engage with you as a salesperson. And it actually comes back to what I said before, which is how, as a buyer, do you want to learn about new tools? And what do you do when you enter the buying cycle? And it's, you ask your peers, you ask your communities, you go in your WhatsApp group where other founders are hanging out, or you go to the meetups to meet other people who are interested in kind of what you're doing, or to have a similar problems with it, and you ask them, right? So you ask your peers, your communities, you ask your network. And this is where this idea of this go-to-network motion comes in, where you, as a company, you are fully orchestrating your network to support your revenue. So what that means is, one, initially mapping your extended network. So it's not just your LinkedIn connections, it's all of your team and investors networks, all of your partners and customers and advisors and vendors networks, anyone who you can use to ask for an intro, to support a deal that's in pipeline, to multi-thread, to influence, to back channel. There's all kinds of different applications and use cases. But the core concept here is that for the first time, you're intentionally orchestrating your network and not just relying on serendipity and happenstance, that at the right time, someone remembers that they know someone at this target account that they should probably go and talk to. So it's really moving away from this spray and pray mass outbound where all the buyers are just, ignoring anything that comes into their inbox, and moving to a much more trusted way. And that's actually kind of going back a little bit to the enterprise sales motion of maybe 20, 30 years ago, where you build relationships with people, and it's more of a long-term perspective versus thinking about this quarter, how are we going to close as many deals as possible and be more transactional. It's kind of more of a longer-term perspective. And it's a bit of a shift, from that has to happen from the executive level down, really from the board level down. But we're starting to see more and more companies adopt it and kind of take on that longer term perspective. And then the results speak for themselves, which I'm happy to talk to you about. The results, both conversion of meetings, win rates, and retention are all way higher than if you're doing the alternative sort of cold outbound approach.
Yeah, before we do that, explain exactly how it works.
Sure. So if you use the Swarm, you can either use it in Clay directly, or you can use our app. What we do is map your company's network and look at the employees and investors of your firm. And then we look through everyone's previous colleagues that they've overlapped with, look at college overlaps, look at community memberships, and start building this relationship graph of your company. And then we score all of those connections to rank whether they're a weak connection, familiar, or strong. And then you have this database of all of your relationships as a firm that you can then go and leverage. Typically, the way people then use it, a great workflow is then to say, here's our target accounts that we're trying to prospect into. Where do we have warm intro paths? Finding those, maybe it's 20, maybe it's 30, maybe it's 50% of our target accounts we have a warm intro path in. An example might be your VP of finance used to overlap with the CFO of this target account for a long time. They were to start up together. That's a really high chance you're going to know each other. So that's the route that you take through the VP of finance to that CFO. And then you're able to get that introduction and that meeting on the calendar. And that's going to convert a lot higher. So we provide the data to unlock all of those use cases. And it's kind of a good way to think about us versus people and relationship data platform. And we're now integrating, as you mentioned, with a lot of the other tools that folks use every day, both within their CRM as well as Clay. And we'll be launching with a bunch more tools this year as well.
Okay. So if I'm thinking about my contacts data, the ones that come to mind are like LinkedIn for sure, Gmail, Google Workspace, contacts in my phone, probably prioritized by who I'm texting, calendar information. Are all these data points considered into like this score and ranking?
They can be. The way we think about it is there's public connections and there's private connections. Public is what we do out of the box. So we map a company's network, and that's more of the previous colleagues that everyone's overlapped with, the college overlaps, the shared investors. We find all your investors' portfolio companies or the execs of those portfolio companies. And that relationship graph is all the public connections. Now, what you're talking about is a private individual's network. So that's LinkedIn, email, calendar, and you can obviously add that in, but it requires the user to consent, to authorize to share that data, right? So for email calendar, you need to hook up your Gmail. For LinkedIn, you either need to export as a CSV or download our Chrome extension. We make it super easy. We actually leverage the GDPR regulations, which allow users to access their own data. It's all sort of happens in the background. It's very, very frictionless. And then you can combine the public and the private. But the key thing that we've figured out is that you don't want to start with the private, because as you wait for all of your team and investors to accept this invite to this new platform and download this Chrome extension, it's going to take days, weeks, and a lot of the times, once you hit over 100 employees, most people just aren't going to do it. So instead, what we do is we start with the public mapping of the at the company level, and then you can layer in your private individual networks on top of it. And that's the key to be able to then, for one salesperson to harness the networks of all of their team and investors, and then add in their LinkedIn and stuff on top of it.
Cool. Okay. So let me see if I got this right. Here's a case study.
Yeah.
So let's say that I've used the Swarm and I've brought that into like all my colleagues. They've got the Swarm. I say, hey, I'm about to go interview David for a podcast interview. What I can see is that like there's going to be a score within my network based on the connection to you. And I might have a guy who's like, oh, actually, David owes me $20. So let me know so you can ask him for it. And I wouldn't have known that otherwise, but I can see the connections that are already occurring. Is that kind of a decent use case?
Yeah. I mean, hopefully it's more than $20. But that's right. So you can see, hey, your colleague has swapped a bunch of emails or had a bunch of meetings with this person already. Maybe someone else on your team is just connected on LinkedIn, right? Which is a pretty weak signal. Connected with thousands of people. Most people only know about 5% of their LinkedIn connections, but you see that someone else on your team used to work together, plus they're connected on LinkedIn, plus they've had a meeting together. All right, that's a strong relationship. I'm going to go through Amanda and our team for that relationship for sure.
Cool. Hey, I want to learn more about the economics of your business, but before that, I want to go into the future a little ways. Let's say 5 years. And I'd love to hear kind of what data streams do you see being really important? For example, I've got one of those B computers that they're shipping to me, where essentially it's a little clip-on wearable that's just constantly recording everything and essentially creating like a separate memory, honestly, that I could access and be like, hey, what color shirt was I wearing when I was talking to David? That kind of thing. But, if you have everybody basically is just recording everything at all times, would that be an intriguing kind of data stream for you? Or how are you looking at the future of data and how that could be interpreted, particularly when you're looking at relationship scoring? Because that's really cool. Like I read another quote of you that said, companies already have warm intros, they just don't know it yet. So what you're gaining is like, hey, we have something in common, which builds trust immediately. It breaks the ice immediately with relationships, and you're able to get somewhere faster. Assuming that you're actually a decent person. Am I working you in the opposite direction if you're a scoundrel? So the question being, in the future, what data sets are going to be important to a tool like this?
Yeah. So I think in the coming years, obviously AI is going to get more powerful and more prevalent. Where we see that playing out is if you think about the funnel of the sales and the same funnel for fundraising or for recruiting, for a lot of company building activities, where you're starting with a lot of leads at the top and you're identifying and then evaluating and then sort of pushing that through the funnel to close. Right? Where we see AI excelling at is at the top of the funnel, where there's huge amounts of data that it's ingesting and processing and then making recommendations. As you get further down the funnel, you really need to rely on humans who want to have a relationship with other humans. And you think about that in a large sales deal, for example. I want to have someone on the other side of the table who's accountable as another human. I don't want to just be interacting with an AI who I don't trust, right? And it's the same thing if you're in recruiting and you want a candidate to take this position, they're going to want to talk to a human, but it doesn't need to happen at every step. And so that's as you get further down the funnel. So I think what AI is going to allow is more of those bottom of funnel activities for more of the humans, which hopefully, most humans actually enjoy is the other, parts of working with other humans. Obviously not all the time, but then everyone's going to have their own AI assistant. So where the data comes into this is one is mapping at a much more granular level all of the relationships, right? So we've already started doing this, ingesting more data sources, some of these things you're talking about, some of them more publicly available, some more privately available. And then that sort of ability to have the fully mapped network of a company just on tap and available. I think that gets better and better over time. And then how we leverage that data is by then getting much more intelligent with the sort of full life cycle of those relationships and be more proactive in saying, here's who you should be nurturing. And you haven't reached out to these people in a while. These are really important potential folks who have large networks that you should be bringing into your company's network. And having this sort of intelligent coach or network, relationship management assistant that can then help both you as an individual, but then as a company to understand, how you can be not just orchestrating the existing network, but actually nurturing and pulling in, additional resources. So it's an interesting evolution, I think, from where we are today. But it's definitely something that's on the short to medium term horizon, and we're not too far away off doing.
Amazing. You sound like a relationship expert. Different kind of relationship expert.
Yeah, I mean,
so I'd love to talk
think about it as a different way.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
You got dating tips too? Is that what you're
I'm
applying?
happily married with 2 young kids, but yeah,
Nice.
happy to talk about dating tips if we need to.
From the research I did, it looks like you were founded in 2021 and have raised about 8 million. Is that ballpark about right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Cool. So when you're going to fund the business, how did you utilize your relationships to make it happen?
Yeah. So I was previously at a venture capital firm called Sequoia Capital, and they had actually
Oh, I've heard of them.
one of the small boutique ones on Sand Hill Road. So they acquired my last startup. So actually we're a bootstrapped outbound recruiting automation company. They were in this build versus buy decision. They acquired the tech that we'd built and then made it exclusively for their portfolio companies. I was then in-house at Sequoia, sort of an in-house product manager, founder in residence, built about 12 different custom tools for their team. So then when I left, I then had that experience, and we took a small check from Sequoia, but then also I wanted to increase the network of folks we had on the cap table. So was able to leverage my network to get intros to other very early stage pre-seed founders and both angel investors who are founders, as well as a couple of VCs who invest when it's still at that napkin, idea on a napkin kind of phase. And it's obviously important to talk to the right investors. So probably 80% I talked to, they were like, "We were way too early. You haven't built anything. This is just an idea." And then there were some who got it, and they're like, "Oh yeah, this is great. We're investing in you as the founder. You'll figure it out, even if the product changes a bunch." And it definitely has. We've pivoted 2 major pivots, really since we started. But we're now at a pretty kind of interesting point where things are definitely taking off.
With that kind of experience at Sequoia, I've got to imagine that like you're at the top of people's social score in order to have those intros and having so much success in Sequoia. Maybe talk a little bit about that experience, what the culture is like, what are they looking for broadly, aside from whatever Elon's doing, and what was it like?
Yeah, it was very interesting. They're a fantastic team. It's very competitive, but it's also like they're a sports team, like a really high performing sports team, where they trust that if you're on the team, that you know what you're doing, and until proven otherwise, you're kind of given a lot of leeway and ability to run, which is very refreshing and kind of cool to see that they really support each other. The things they look for, especially in founders, looking for that proven track record. I think one interesting analysis they did was the best founders that they'd ever invested in, and there's different archetypes. And one of the the most successful founder was the veteran, who is someone a little bit older, right? Maybe in their 30s, even early 40s, and they've had domain expertise in an industry, and they have then starting a company. So it's a very big shift from it's called the dynamo, which is they're very early in their career, maybe college dropout, Mark Zuckerberg type persona, who I think gets a lot of the front of the magazine type attention. But actually, most successful founders are typically a little bit older, more experienced. And I think a lot of it comes to the network. Right? They have the network of both potential customers, they have the trust and credibility of those customers, they have team members that they can pull in quickly, and that obviously leads to better funding. And it's a virtuous flywheel that spins for these more experienced founders. So if you listen to this and you're a little bit older and you're a little bit further in your career, that's actually a good thing. So take that as a good sign to then maybe jump out of the cushy corporate job and then start that startup.
Yeah, that is very encouraging. Particularly I spoke to a founder once and he was concerned to raise VC capital because he didn't think he was autistic enough. And I was like, that's a weird thing to say. But he's like, yeah, if I don't show up and play video games on the board meetings, then they won't think I'm smart enough to do it. And I thought he was joking, but I was like, he was kind of serious, So yeah, that's interesting. I appreciate you sharing that. So when we're talking about the swarm, how would you identify your ideal customers?
Yeah, so we're looking at really focusing in on sales and revenue teams. There's a bunch of other use cases. We have both customers in the recruiting field, in the VC, investor, private equity field. But for us, the sales and revenue teams seem to be the highest ROI, right? It sort of makes sense as it's more revenue generating activities. So mid-market to enterprise, and there are folks who usually have teams of SDRs, salespeople, maybe 5+, who are currently doing an outbound motion already and are trying to figure out how they can improve their conversion of meetings and definitely how they can better leverage their network.
Cool. And, I was looking at your pricing page. It looks like you're kind of a SaaS model. How did you kind of land on price points, and what was kind of pricing a consideration as you were kind of building the product?
Oh man, this has evolved so much over time. I think we initially did it based on features, right? And different abilities. We always wanted to have a freemium approach where people could try it for free. As customers of other tools ourselves, we just want to try it before we commit to buying it, or even have to wait to talk to someone and do a demo, and sort of waste hours before you even realize that this isn't a fit. So we tried to make it as easy as possible just to try it out. Then the price points are more coming in usage based these days. We have some lower cost pricing that you can try with the SaaS product, but for the API and the data, that's usually all just usage based depending on the credits that you need per month. And those are all custom just depending on the volume that you're doing. Obviously it gets cheaper as you scale up.
Yeah. You launched in 2021. The first place on Product Hunt, was that kind of an official launch after a pivot, or kind of how does that play into your founding date?
Yeah, so that was really our first public launch. We were technically in beta until that point. As I mentioned, we pivoted a couple of times, both from pure recruiting into more sales, from just the SaaS products into one of the data products. And we had been thinking about when do we do the Product Hunt launch. We obviously always wanted to do it and to announce it more publicly. It reached this point where we recently did the Clay integration and had some great feedback from that. We also had a free Chrome extension that we just re-released with a bunch of free emails for everybody, a couple 100 million emails. So we decided that was a nice inflection point to then do the Product Hunt launch. And my co-founder, Olivier, was the mastermind behind that. Definitely recommend following him on LinkedIn, and he's got the guide and the playbook there if anyone wants to have a look at how we did it.
Yeah, very cool. I mean, there's a certain amount of strategy and tactics that go in, but ultimately it's going to be the quality of the product that's going to drive it that high. I mean, you got something like almost 800 updates.
Yep.
So it's pretty incredible, man. Congrats.
Thanks, man.
And that was, what was the date? That was just like a month or two ago?
Yeah, that, just under a month ago. It was like free through April 9th. Yeah.
Cool. Are you at liberty to say the ballpark of number of customers?
Yeah, we've got now a couple of thousand customers who have tried it out. And then, there's some in there that are free, some that are paid, but we're now, and for the API, we're now over 30 API customers. And those are all, sort of minimum, I get the numbers around here, minimum 5-figure contracts.
Yeah. Amazing. What does the next 12 months look like for the Swarm? What are you really excited about?
So we've got this interesting data that we're now allowing other platforms to integrate into their products and sort of spreading the good word of what we're doing far and wide. And then the next sort of evolution is building the kind of workflows on top of the data ourselves. So we sort of see this marketplace of agents that we'll be releasing, allow other people to build agents as well. And then there's different things that you can do both in finding more mature paths, but also in champion tracking and identifying potential interesting people to pull into your network. And obviously, fully orchestrating this go-to-network motion, but through the help of agents and not just relying on humans to do all the heavy lifting. Yeah.
Oh, how far are we from like fully autonomous agents? I know there's ChatGPT said something like, I don't know, $20K a month. You could actually build them at this point. How far do you think that is before we're there?
Really depends on what the workflow is. I think
Sure.
I think that we have assistants right now, really like fully reasoning agents that can interact autonomously with other platforms is still a while away. But I'd say hesitantly end of this year, I think we should start seeing some, maybe the next 6 months. I think that at least for some simple workflows to start, right? And then getting more and more complex over time. But I'm already seeing some really interesting platforms pop up to help agents to pay and receive payments. More and more like API docs that have like the option of like, are you an agent or are you a human reading this? So there's more of that kind of underlying infrastructure that's being set up and established right now, which is exciting to see.
Amazing. What's the team size?
We're 9 full-time.
Killer, man. Where can people connect with you personally?
Best place is on LinkedIn, LinkedIn/IN/Connors David, but I'm sure put it in the notes. I post there pretty regularly about my musings on kind of what's going on in the industry, and happy to chat with anyone who wants to learn more about what we're building.
Very cool. I'm excited about it. Of course, the website is theswarm.com where people can check out the product and grab the browser extension and give it a shot. I have yet to tinker around with it, but I'm really excited about it. It looks really cool, man. Congrats.
Appreciate it. Thanks again, Ryan.
Absolutely. That's a wrap. Until next time, we'll talk to you real soon. Thanks for listening to the show.
Cheers.
So let's talk about podcasts for a second. You're listening to one, which is awesome, by the way. Thank you so much. But have you ever thought about being a guest on a podcast? Like seriously, imagine sharing your story and your expertise and your business all on shows where your ideal customers are already listening. Kitcaster connects founders and entrepreneurs, professionals with podcasts that actually make sense for their brand. No pitching, no guessing. You just have great conversations on great shows. And the best part, Kitcaster handles everything. You just show up and bring your A game, Kitcaster does the rest. This is hands down one of the easiest ways to grow your personal brand and just create a wellspring of content for short video, for blog posts, for speaking engagements, for whatever. So if you've been thinking, I really need to step up my content game, go to kitcaster.com and apply today. Now back to the show.